The Mesopotamian Pantheon that can be derived from various materials is clearly based on the Sumerian model, but the aspects and identities of deities change from place to place and from era to era. So the gods of the Mesopotamian region were not uniform in names, power, provenance, or status, and sometimes several gods become one, or one divides into several. Collectively, these deities are the Anunnaki, or the royal ones. Keep in mind that these divinities were often personifications of natural phenomena, concepts rather than anthropomorphic beings. They were often paired as the male and female aspects of the same phenomenon, and tended to be associated with particular cities to reflect the characteristics of those same areas. These were some of the most important divinities, but since the Mesopotamian people worshipped between 300 and 1,000 different gods, it is by no means a complete listing. Other divinities will be discussed in future videos. Anu was the somewhat distant Mesopotamian father god, an embodiment of heavens and a member of the triad of deities completed by Enlil and Enki. He was known as the Lord of Heaven in the stories written about him. His consort and feminine counterpart was Antu, and from their union were born the Anunnaki. The Sumerian word An is translated as heaven. Anu was thus associated with thunder rolling across the skies, so during storms he was imagined as a great bull roaring above the clouds. Although being the highest god like most sky divinities, Anu played a small role in the mythology and cults of Mesopotamia. He became in time the supreme lord who was the power behind those of other divinities. Not only was he the father of every single god, but also of evil spirits and demons. We should note here that the English word demon, often understood as evil spirit, comes from the Greek word daimon, which means spirit. So all supernatural entities mentioned as demons in the Mesopotamian religion were not necessarily evil. On earth, he was the Lord of Kings and often depicted in a headdress with horns, which is a sign of strength. This bovine imagery suggests that he belonged to the herder's pantheon. Therefore, he seems to have been a mythological descendant of the Neolithic bull gods. However, this form was later disassociated from the god as a separate entity, the bull of heaven, owned by the god Anu himself. In the Babylonian version, Anu was born of the primordial couple Anshar and Kishar, and his cult center was in Uruk. If at first he was the most powerful of the gods, he lost some of his importance over the centuries, giving way to the gods Enlil, Marduk, and the goddess Inanna. Enlil was the Mesopotamian god of the atmosphere and a member of the triad of divinities who ruled heaven, earth, and the underworld. He was the only god besides Anu who could bestow the important elements of the Sumerian concept of divine order upon other divinities. Not only was he the Sumerian god of the air whose name means Lord of the Wind, but was far more powerful than any mere elemental deity. Both the hurricane and the gentle winds of spring were thought to be the breath issued from his mouth, and eventually has his word of command. Like many storm divinities from around the world, Enlil was in some ways more important than the highest god in the Sumerian pantheon, for he is the embodiment of energy, force, and authority. His cult center was the holy city of Nippur, and from there forward, he gave authority to the Sumerian kings in the name of his father. The god Enlil was often prayed to in hopes of a fair weather for a good harvest. He was invoked to bless his cities to ensure prosperity and abundance. Such was his prominence that the patron gods of other cities traveled to offer him gifts of all kinds. Holder of the sacred tablets of destiny, he was the lord of the Sumerian pantheon after 2500 BCE and was much venerated by the Akkadians, which led him to be featured in a number of myths as a supreme deity and king of the gods. There is a myth describing how he separated heaven and earth to make room for seeds to grow, while another tells about the non-consensual love affair he had with his Babylonian female equivalent, leading to his subsequent banishment to the Underworld. This particular myth reflects the agricultural cycle of fertilization, ripening, and wintering activity. Because of his unique national status, he was downgraded in both Babylonian and Assyrian pantheons, and was eventually absorbed into the god Marduk as an executive of the Babylonian religion who continued to be worshipped only as an important divinity of Nippur until the end of the second millennium. Just like the first two, Enki was one of the most prominent Mesopotamian gods known in Sumer and was further developed by the Akkadians. The Babylonian god of wisdom and the underground fresh waters was a deity necessary to irrigation, a crucial practice in the southern marshlands of what is present-day Iraq. From a local deity, Enki evolved into a major divinity who was a kind of a trickster famous for his powerful incantations. Wise and skillful at any craft, Enki is believed to be the son of Anu and is commonly represented as a horned figure with streams of water springing from his shoulders, or as a half-goat and half-fish creature from which the modern astrological figure for Capricorn came from. As the god of water in his capacity to nourish the earth, Enki became one of the most beloved gods in the Mesopotamian religion because of his intervention during the Great Flood, where he saved humankind by advising a good man to build an ark before the waters come. Then, he gave away the gifts of civilization and property of the gods to the goddess Inanna, knowing that she would disperse them to humanity. Finally, in the Sumerian myth Enki and the world order, he is believed to have set national boundaries and appointed various minor deities to their roles in connection with the well-being of the natural world. Therefore, Enki is portrayed as a friend of humanity and was the advocate among the other gods. He was uniformly perceived as the wisest deity in the pantheon and was the patron of all craftsmen, artisans, and exorcists. In his original form, and like most trickster divinities, Enki possessed an insatiable sexual appetite and was thus associated with semen and amniotic fluid, a fact that was probably a metaphorical expression of his role as a god of fertility and waters. Eventually, the most famous Mesopotamian goddess was Inanna, who is often depicted riding on a lion and referred to as the Queen of Heaven and Lady of the Dead clusters. She was the foremost goddess and patron of the city of Uruk, to which she was said to have given the sacred laws that were entrusted to her in a drunken revel by the god of wisdom. Because of her assimilation with the Semitic goddess Ishtar, she has complete dominion over war, passion, sexuality, and was called Mistress of the Meh, making her one of the most powerful Mesopotamian divinities. However, it is uncertain whether Inanna is also of Semitic origin, or whether her similarity to Ishtar was what caused the two to be identified to one another. In the figure of Inanna, several traditions seem to have been combined, so depending on the tradition, she was either the daughter of Nana, god of the moon, or Enlil. But above everything, she was the goddess of love and was central to the ubiquitous Mesopotamian ritual of the sacred marriage. In Babylon, Inanna could also play the role of a possibly dangerous femme fatale, as in the case of her attempt to seduce the hero Gilgamesh. She was also the goddess of rain and thunderstorms, leading to her association with Anu, for she rode on a lion whose roar resembles the sound of thunder, and thus the power attributed to her in war may have arisen from her connection to storms. Central to the most famous stories regarding her relationship with her sister Ereshkigal, goddess of the Underworld, and with Dumuzid, who epitomizes the fertile power behind the date harvest. Many accounts mainly depict the goddess Inanna as a young, highly sexual, beautiful, and impulsive divinity, but never as a mother. Her primary legacy from the Sumerian tradition is the role of a fertility figure, but she evolved into a more complex character surrounded in myth by death and disaster, a goddess of contradictory connotations and forces. In many centers of worship, she probably subsumed numerous local goddesses, and her popularity was universal in the ancient Middle East, eventually making her way into what became the top 5 of Sumerian divinities. Nabu was the Babylonian god of writing and wisdom, son of Marduk and grandson of the god of wisdom. His name means the announcer, in reference to his prophetic abilities and the gifts of writing. He is depicted holding a stylus and either riding on or standing beside a dragon, the patron god of scribes who safeguarded the tablets of destiny, which validated the rule of the universe. Nabu was one of the most important gods of Mesopotamia, and without him, the great Babylonian Akkadian festival held to honor the gods and give thanks for the harvest could not be celebrated. He was venerated for thousands of years and was among the few to survive the fall of the Assyrian Empire, when the statues of many gods were sacked by invading forces. He is often compared with Thoth of the Egyptians, Apollo by the Greeks, and Mercury by the Romans. Other kinds of deities existed in Mesopotamia, especially the gods of cities such as the eponymous Assyrian Ashur and the god Marduk. Ashur at various periods was assimilated with earlier divinities such as Enlil, Anshar, and eventually Marduk. In Mesopotamian religion, Marduk is the Babylonian king of the gods, the hero who defeated the forces of chaos and brought order to the universe, which the gods and humans alike work together to maintain. Therefore, all nature, including mankind, owe him their existence. As the central figure in the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, he is portrayed as a deity of healing, justice, compassion, and fairness. The god Marduk was known as the peacekeeper among the other gods and was in this regard referred to as the Holy Shepherd. Based in some account, Marduk was not only the chief god of the city of Babylon, but was the national patron of Babylonia. He was one of the most popular divinities of Mesopotamia, adopted by the Assyrians as the son of their supreme god, Ashur. And because of it, his nature was associated not with fertility in particular, but with the rise of the city-state which he was the patron of. He came into his own after the rise to power of Hammurabi and became the god of 50 names, each one was that of a divine attribute. Although he existed in earlier scriptures and was even said to be the son of Enki, Marduk was essentially created as a new god in Babylon. Anu and Enlil gave him suzerainty over the human society. Therefore, he was considered to be a deity easily accessible in human prayers, one who cared about humanity and their problems. In common traditions, Marduk's popularity grew during the various political developments in Babylon, and over the centuries his cult spread throughout Mesopotamia. As it was written in the Babylonian creation myth, he was perceived to be the king not only of humans, but of the gods themselves. The Mesopotamian culture varied from a region to another, and as such, Marduk shouldn't be regarded as king of the gods in the same way Zeus ruled in Greece. While he was highly venerated in Babylon, Enlil held that position in Sumer. What stands out about gods and goddesses whose origins are in Sumer is their association with agriculture and fertility. Although fascinating myths around these divinities evolved, it seems clear that such myths were like the principal characters within them, seen not so much as literal histories, but as metaphors for natural phenomena and the practices of agriculture and animal husbandry. This is it for part 1 on the Mesopotamian Pantheon, so see you next time for another video. And as always, stay curious.